Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all back from your coffee and get the town if you were there. The next session that is called EOSC and ScienceMesh. Let's say we have three speakers in this session. One speaker is a board member of the EOSC Association. EOSC Association is the body that governs the European Open Science Cloud Initiative. The implementation of the Open Science Cloud Initiative is in the hands of the so-called advisory groups, which have task forces, that are work on certain dedicated projects and topics. We have two members of those task forces here in the house for this afternoon. The first speaker I'd like to introduce is Professor Ignacio Blanquer. He will discuss about the goals of the EOSC Association and also plans that they have to advance open science in Europe. And we have two members of the task forces. That will be Pierre-Yves Bourgie and Roberto Di Cosmo, who will give their insights on the priorities and the work that they are doing in these task forces, and also help us brainstorm in what these task forces are doing and what other infrastructures are delivering and what the ScienceMesh is going to contribute to the Open Science Cloud, how this can be brought together. Well, let me give a first, let's say, introduce you, Professor Blanquer. Ignacio Blanquer is a professor of the Computer System Department at the UPV in Valencia since 1999. He has been a member of the research group on grid and high performance computing of the Institute of Instrumentation for Molecular Imaging. And he's also becoming a leader of this group and the vice director in 2019. He's also the coordinator of the Spanish network of eScience and serves as an expert to the Spanish Ministry of Science in the areas of eScience. So I'd now like to give the floor to Professor Blanquer.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for your kind words. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present the EOSC Association in this forum. I hope that I will raise the attention and the interest for some of the points, and I think that they will be complemented by the task forces presentations of my colleagues. So please, next slide. Right, so let me first briefly, I mean, I know that many of you already are quite aware of the concept of EOSC, just let me rephrase a bit and explain a bit which were the origin of all these initiatives. So we start from 2016, so long ago, with the high-level expert group on EOSC that set up and defined some principles for the implementation, which has been carried out intensively by a set of infra-EOS projects that in which some of them I will concentrate also on the creation of some working groups from the EOSC Executive Board, which managed the launch of the European Open Science Cloud by the end of 2018, and the creation of the association by middle 2020. The association entered in full work during 2021, and with the setup of the task forces by the very end. So EOSC, as you know, is a virtual environment for open access to services, stores, share, process, and reuse research data. It has been intensively funded by different initiatives and also currently Destination 2. So next slide. So an important effort that has been done towards the creation of the definition of the model of the EOSC was the working groups of the EOSC Executive Board that were created in the frame of the EOSC Secretariat project. In these 6 working groups, they were addressing different aspects like landscape, for the inventory in relation to multiple dimensions of EOSC, FAIR, architecture, rules of participation, skills, training, sustainability, and many of them have an important relation with the topic of this workshop, like the word of the FAIR, with the FAIR practices for data, and the part, especially the working groups on architecture, in which the interoperability framework report was defined as some report on the architecture blueprint also prepared, created, and also on a scholarship infrastructure for research software defined. Again, also it's important also to state that in the skills and training also there was a lot of effort on defining the research software engineer and data science role in the EOSC. So next slide, please. So how is EOSC managed? So EOSC is managed, or the implementation is guided through a tripartite model. In this model, we have the European Union represented by the European Commission, the community represented by the EOSC Association, and the countries represented by the steering board that was set up on 2021 and is acting as a national-based body to drive the implementation and coordination of national policies. So association is an important part of this government part and represent the community. So the association basically, if you go to next slide, please, is now currently formed by more than 230 members, 233 members, participants, partners, I would say. 2/3 of them are full members with both rights and also the capability to elect and propose members for the presidency and the director, and 73 observers. So most of them come from research performing organizations, but also a service providing organization has an important part of the share. So next slide. Yeah, so the implementation guideline is defined in that is called the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda, which is a document that is linked to the slides that you have available, in which all the objectives, all the KPIs or the plans or the activities are extensively defined for a long period of execution. So let me state three of the general objectives, or the three general objectives, which are to ensure that open science principles and skills are becoming the new normal, to enable the definition of standards, and especially relevant for this workshop, the establishment of a sustainable and federated infrastructure to enable the open sharing of scientific results. So next slide. Along with these general objectives, we have several specific objectives that are very critical for the success factors. And I try to outline three of them that again have a lot of relation with this workshop, which are the specific of the Objective 5, the EOSC Interoperability Framework definition for fair digital objects, including data and software and other research artifacts. The specific Object 6, providing an increased number of services and resources to make the concept of EOS viable. And the number 7, which is the definition and the operationalization of a stable and valuable infrastructure. So next slide. And also, there are several operational objectives, and I just outlined three of them, which are of crucial interest for our group. So we have the minimal viable EOSC definition by 2025, the technical components of a fair ecosystem uptake and customization, and the co-development of a first generation of a pan-European network of infrastructure for software source code by 2025 again. So as you see, there are real tangible actions that they are planning to be executed. So next slide. Yeah, how we want to define all these or coordinate all the activities. So we set up a set of working groups, advisory groups, 5 advisory groups that are covering different areas of related to the implementation of EOSC, that also complements the work that has been done in the expert boards of the executive board. So in this these 5 advisory groups in total define 13 task forces that address points like the technical challenges regarding the technical interoperability of data and services, infrastructure for quality research software, and other related to data interoperability like semantic interoperability, fair metrics, and long data preservation. So all these different task forces are liaised through a member of the board of directors in order to have some degree of coordination. So next slide. As you will see, the number of people that wanted to contribute has been huge. So we were really proud to see this commitment from the community. And finally, there was selected by the chairs of the task forces 450 applicants, right? Experts that relate to the different areas. So these representatives are meeting frequently in order to align their plans and try to provide some deliverables that will help on the implementation. You can see all the draft remits in the links there. So next slide. Yeah, among all these different task forces, I wanted to raise one of them that I know that Alvaro couldn't come, which is the one related to technical interoperability. This task force is focused on defining several standardization guidelines, several principles, architecture blueprints, definitions, guidelines, and recommendations in order to achieve the federation concept of connecting different research infrastructures and generic e-infrastructures. So in this case, this task force is coordinated by Álvaro López from CSIC in Spain and Eva Siaka from the INAF in Italy. So you can see the draft charted there that states that the objective is to take as basis this interoperability framework as recommendation and develop a technical architecture to develop this EOSC core and exchange set of services. So the task forces are not developing services, but are providing guidelines. So it has 4 subgroups dedicated to 4 areas: landscape, data technical interoperability, service technical interoperability, and technical architecture recommendations, and plans to release 5 deliverables, 4 deliverables, and 1 with a revision, addressing all these different definition examples, blueprints, and recommendations. So next slide. Just to end, so I want to say that EOSC aims at fostering the development of open science by enriching publication data and software according to FAIR principles, according to federation, according to different approaches to make them usable for machines and scientists and get more rewarded research. And through the task forces, we believe that we will be able to coordinate the development of all and the gathering all the knowledge that is needed to create this and to guide the development of these assets. If you want to get more information, you have the points there. So thank you very much again. I will be at your disposal for questions later on.
Okay, well, thank you very much. The next speaker in this session, that will be Pierre-Yves Bourgie from University of Geneva. He has a PhD in computer science. At the moment, he is the head of the Information, Communication and Educational Technologies unit from University of Geneva. And he is also a member of the Long-Term Data Preservation Task Force. Pierre, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Juan. Good afternoon. So indeed, I will explain a little bit what we are doing with this Long-Term Data Preservation Task Force, which started 3 months ago. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what is the aim of this task force? It's really providing a recommendation for the EOSC board, as we understood before. But this is for the thematic of the implementation of long-term data preservation policies and practices. We also want to make some suggestions on the strategy execution, and also addressing the roles and responsibilities of the different stakeholders, also the financial aspects, which is very important for long-term preservation, and the necessary infrastructure. And next slide, please. So who are we? This task force is composed of 36 members from 16 countries. And here I show the distribution of the different institutions which are involved in this task force. So mainly is from service providing organizations. I give some examples, it's not exhaustive here. And of course, this classification is not exclusive. If I take my case, for instance, I'm from the University of Geneva, so I would be more like a research community, but also I represent Holos.Swiss, which is a national service for long-term preservation. And so this is clearly a service providing organization. Next slide, please. So because we have a lot of thematics to address, we organized in subgroups. And so task force has 2 co-chairs, and each subgroup has a coordinator. And here you see the 4 subgroups, which I'm going to describe now, all of them. Next slide, please. So the first one is about shared understanding and vision. This is very important to speak the same language. What we already with the kickoff meeting we had already in this task force on other meetings, what we could observe is that even within our community of experts in long-term preservation, we didn't agree all the time on the terminology. So of course, this is very important, not only within our task force to understand each other, but also to define clearly what we mean by digital preservation. And also we want to map the broad long-term data preservation landscape, which is quite heterogeneous. And you find different maturity levels in this domain, and with a lot of stakeholders. So we want to provide suggestions, policies and strategies for the retention and curation. Curation is very important, of course, and it's whole field. How to collaborate and create synergies. But risk analysis, it is important risk to be hacked, especially for long-term preservation. So we have to be very careful. So the expected output from this group is recommendation of the vision and sustainable implementation of long-term data preservation policies and practices, and suggestion for strategy execution. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. Financial aspect. As I said before, this is a very important question, and you have to question the value of data because it costs a lot of money to preserve them, including the indirect cost like carbon footprint, for instance. And we want also to identify business cases, which is of course very important as well to get the right way to manage financially this infrastructure. So the expected output is a mapping of the financial aspects of long-term data preservation, including the financial responsibilities of the different stakeholders, and also mapping these different business models. Next slide, please. Trusted repositories. So we have to establish an inventory of the operating European repositories. So there are already a few of them. And we have to see also to assess those which are already certified or will be certified by 2025, which is a requirement of EOSC to be operated. So expected output is recommendation on the creation of this European network of this trustworthy digital repository. One important aspect is that they have to be fair, F-A-I-R. We have to give a recommendation for EOSC about data services connected to this network, and also establish a roadmap to further mature the long-term preservation aspect of these repository services. Next slide. How do we proceed for this work and this, how we work in these different groups? First, we do desk research to identify reports. So we are in the first phase reading a lot of papers, reports. We are going to have open consultation with webinar workshops. And then we will revise recommendation based on decision-making and consensus, so that we really have an open discussion between us to get this consensus. The planned duration of this task force is 24 months, so it should be finished by December 2023. Next slide. And of course, we are not alone. And so we have to create synergies with other task forces, which are listed here. And there are quite a few with which we have to collaborate, because we have a lot of aspects which are shared between these different task forces. Next slide, please. And yes, if you want to know more about this task force, you have the link here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Pierre-Yves. So our next speaker, that will be Roberto Di Cosmo. He's a director at the Software Heritage Project. And he is also a member of the Infrastructure for Quality Research Software. He was a professor of computer science at the University Paris Diderot, and currently is on leave to head the Software Heritage Project. Roberto.
Okay, thanks a lot. Can you hear me? Does it work? I hope so.
Yes. Yeah.
Perfectly. Yep.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, thanks for having me with you here today. So I prepared some slides to give you a little bit of a presentation of where the Task Force on Infrastructure for Quality Research Software comes from and what it is planning to do. So if you can move to the next slide. So a little bit of background. Over a year ago, during the initial phase of the preparation of the EOSC that Ignacio Blanquer already presented to you, there was a working group that was dedicated to analyzing the landscape and the needs and what is a roadmap for scholarly infrastructure for research software. And so the focus there was precisely on source code, and not on every possible virtual machine or executable that you can imagine, and in particular on the issue of archiving, referencing, describing, and giving credit to authors for software source code. This task force brought together actually representatives from a broad variety of different actors in this space that already work in this area. So by the way, since we are hosted by CERN, you will be happy to know that Zenodo was part of this group, and then you have HAL, which is a national open access archive in France, Software Azure, which is the organization I lead, which is creating the Universal Software Archive. Then you have publishers and aggregators, etc. This is a huge report that I do suggest you to have a look at. It is almost 100 pages with a lot of real precise workflow requirements, state of the art, etc. And if you can move to the next slide, please. To sum it up, I mean, it's kind of complicated to sum up the 100 pages, but let me give you a big picture. So overall, what we understood is that there is a general architecture of this infrastructure that support software in the scholarly world. I mean, you have a part which is a scholarly ecosystem where you find scholarly repositories like Zenodo or HAL or many others. You find publishers, you find aggregators like OpenAir or other places similar. And this ecosystem is just one part of the world around software. Then you have other ecosystems. You have an industry ecosystem, a public administration ecosystem, a cultural heritage ecosystem, because as you know, I mean, software is really pervasive. And so it is important to build our common infrastructure using a common layer, which is provided by a universal software archive. It doesn't archive just research software, but also all the other parts. And so the main challenges identified is how to actually ensure long-term archiving for the different layers, I mean, the source code and then the extra information that comes in the scholarly ecosystems, I mean, specific metadata and citation information, etc. How to ensure global referencing, having descriptions which are interoperable, how to find a way of crediting authors properly. So in the report, you see a bunch of actionable recommendations. So one, of course, is to bring more often and better together people working for archives, for publishers, and for aggregators. Try to focus on a common metadata standards. You all know the ITSCA CD about the 13 standard that become 14. Okay, so try to avoid that. So, for example, there is one which is called Meta that seems to have some consensus behind it. Try to focus on it. Organize the identification of software artifacts at the different layers. So, use intrinsic identifier for the source code and extrinsic identifiers for the higher levels, so in project names, teams, etc. Support proper citation, etc., etc. So that was kind of well defined, right? It's a report which is state of the art. Out of this, and together with other issues, came the idea of creating this task force. We can move to the next slide, because now the background, I think, is well established. Next slide, please. Again, thanks. Wait. Back, no, forward one step. Thanks, just there. So the new gaming town is this infrastructure for quality research software that I have the pleasure to co-chair with Isabel Campos. You have a draft charter which is available. I mean, click just on the blue thing in the slides that will be shared, you will get there. And so the objectives here is actually multiple. On one side is to take the recommendation from this SIRS report, which is contains a lot of work, and try to actually work to implement them by fostering development and deployment of the kind of tools that are needed for archiving, reference describing, and sharing research software. But there are new issues that come too. One is the quality of the software that we are looking at. How can we support better quality? In particular for software and services that are offered through the EOS, but the issue is more general, so there is a group working on that in particular. And also another issue, which is how to increase actually recognition of the work done by software developers and maintainers to bring it to a par with what happens with publication and data. So I do not know where country you come from, but I mean, the situation is very uneven. It is not the same if you're in France or in Germany or in Italy or in Spain. There are places where actually software development in academia counts for 0, and this must change. So let's move to the next slide. In this slide, you see how we design the core activities for this task force. Of course, we need to connect to what exists. The software is huge. It is not just in research. You need to have a landscaping effort. Then there is, of course, as I mentioned before, this SIRS report implementation. I mean, there the plan is already clear, and we need to disseminate it and collaborate with projects that actually implement it. And then work on issues like quality and sustainability. And there are some transversal issues like what we do about career development, education, and training. Okay, the plan is not of doing everything, okay, but it's just to provide guidance, provide suggestions in the framework of the EOSC to address all these issues. Next slide. You see the task force actually attracted a lot of interest. So we have 41 members for 17 different countries in different roles, and it goes from research engineers to full professors to lead organizations. I mean, really a broad range of expertise that comes in. And then if we can move to the next slide, you will see I copied the presentation from the previous presentation. Thanks a lot. So again, it is organizing co-chairs with a bunch of subgroups, and there is a typo. Well, okay. In the subgroups, there is one which is dedicated to the software life cycle. So there we try to understand better, I mean, this issue related to quality, sustainability, etc., etc. Another on the information science perspective, and this is exactly the implementation of this SIRS report. And the last one, which is not software life cycle, the title is actually ensuring quality software. This is for seeing how to measure and improve software quality in general. So next slide here, the working group just started working. Next slide. Okay. And again, if you want to know more about, for example, who is in the working group, there is nothing secret, and the full list of participants is online on this web page. And I hope I could keep the 5 minutes. Thanks a lot. I will stop here.
Oh, thank you very much, Roberto. Then I'd like to ask the audience, are there any questions, remarks?
So maybe if we have a little bit of time.
Yes, we have.
So thank you very much for these very interesting presentations. I am Kuba Mościcki. I'm the coordinator of the CS3 Mesh for EOSC project, and I'm from CERN. And I actually would like to. I think one of the, one of the interesting aspects of this discussion could be, we've been thinking a lot, how we can, what we can bring to EOSC as this community, because we have a community of users, community of service providers, multidisciplinary one, including also the commercial software vendors, all based on open source, but including commercial software vendors. And also we have many elements, that you have mentioned. For example, in this community, we have initiatives already and discussions already for many years on interoperability between these different services, because this is an essential, is essentially the essential component. And actually, what we are trying to build is a ScienceMesh is based on all those technical elements and all those actually running and deployed systems by essentially ensuring that there is a interoperability between them, and thus creating a kind of a federated environment which works seamlessly for all the users, no matter which particular technology they use or particular EFSS platform. For what concerns long-term preservation, we have one of our application workflows to which the ScienceMesh users have access is the connection to the digital to the open data repositories. Obviously Zenodo, but also more broadly other repositories, Invenio RDM-based repositories, for example. And I think about the quality infrastructure, we also have a topic in common here, because as a part of our federated infrastructure, we monitor the quality of it essentially as well. We have monitoring metrics. We do have testing, so to ensure that the entire operational status is known, understood, and under control. And we've been discussing for a long time in the project, but also in this wider CS3 community. Here we have also in the audience many people who are from the broader CS3 community. How we can bring some added value to EOSC, and also how EOSC can help us to get some added value from itself. So I don't know. It's just an open question. I don't know. It's nothing really specific, but I think it's probably something that I guess many people in the audience are asking themselves.
Okay. Maybe if I can take this, Jakub, thank you for the question. Thank you for the comment. First, start saying that the association by itself, the task forces, are not implementing directly, are not the driving forces. There is the projects, right? And the way that we could help is providing the framework for this coordination to happen, and also to break the silos of the individual projects, to see and to facilitate this community, right? So the task forces were a nice instrument in order to create a team of experts. And I believe that there are many task forces in which the experts are not, involved in some of the projects that are running out. There are new projects that are coming, and we are defining the way how to interact with the project, but for sure that will be crucial. I think that it will be very important if the chairs of the different task forces make an analysis of the different, or we will do through the association also, of the different projects and analyze how they can we contribute in general. I mean, in the past, in the last implementation phase, I will say, of the Commission, there were very few meetings for consultation meetings for the project, right? And we have to break this and try to bring everybody together. And for sure, there are efforts in all the projects that have to be recognized and promoted.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And can I just quickly ask something, Ron, before you hand over to Silvana? So,
okay, go ahead.
So I'm curious. So what is? So I understand that now the task forces are preparing a report, and actually many of us are involved in different task forces. But what's a kind of a global plan? So once the task forces deliver their report, what, in your view, what is the impact you expect from this, and what is your point of view how this will be taken on further into the future, and what actually will become of that output of the task forces?
Yes, I see two main outputs. I mean, the outputs that they already have defined in terms of deliverable that are very aligned with the main charter, and also the contribution to the multi-annual roadmap, which is the global view of all the implementation steps that are needed. And this is which I think that everybody...
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Kuba. And thank you, Ignacio. I hope you've had a glass of water there. I just wanted to pick up on what you're saying, and it's linked to the next session as well. Where we, in fact, have been trying in the past weeks, just recently, to see, look, how can we, and we've been calling it joining the dots, yeah? And this opportunity of the ScienceMesh perfect gathering to say, right, there are efforts ongoing. And in fact, in the next session, we'll see some different science cluster organizations showing how they're already working with CS3 and ScienceMesh. And what we wanted to do, now that we're in, okay, January's finished, but there's going to be an adopter program as part of the EOSC Future project. I don't know when that's being launched. I think the Technical Strategic Board is putting that together. But that's a perfect opportunity for us to put together some simple EOSC in practice stories that are part of EOSC Future.